also right next to Quebec. So
Well, the room got quiet, so it's as good a time as any to get started, huh? Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us today for this exciting discussion. My name is Laura Lott, and I'm the Chief Operating Officer at the American Alliance of Museums. We often talk about museums as essential education institutions, engines of economic activity and tourism, and anchors for our communities, and we should. But today we're here to talk about something that is perhaps new to many of you, museums and public diplomacy. Museums teach us about the rich mosaic of world cultures, making the foreign seem familiar. This happens through loans, from paintings to pandas, supported by the scholarship of museum professionals in the US and around the world. But while objects can be powerful, they simply can't match the power of face-to-face interactions to help bridge cultural divides. It's this personal interaction that makes museums such strong partners in conducting the State Department's profound work in cultural diplomacy. Central to this partnership is the core truth that everyday citizens are often the best representatives of their countries. That shared belief inspired the creation of Museums Connect, the grant program, in 2007. Museums Connect enables U.S. and non-U.S. museums to design partner projects that address a common need. Just this year, participants will be tackling a wide range of critical issues, including hurricane recovery, autism advocacy, environmental conservation, nutrition, and cultural identities. The primary participants are community members, often youth, who join with the staff of partnering museums. Participants travel to their partner countries where they spend time together at work and at play. We're excited to share some of these stories with you today. I'm pleased now to introduce our next speaker from our partner at the U.S. Department of State, Rick Ruth. Rick serves as Senior Advisor to the Assistant Secretary in the Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs, where he advises on all aspects of international exchange policy, programs, and management. Rick is a former Foreign Service officer serving abroad in Jordan, Saudi Arabia, and the former Soviet Union. He was Deputy Chief of Staff to 4 directors of the U.S. Information Agency, and Rick spearheaded cultural heritage as a key component of foreign policy, pioneered the quantitative measurement of exchange programs, and originated the first high school exchange program for the Arab and Muslim world. Please help me welcome Rick Ruth.
Thank you, Laura, and thanks to all of you. It's a pleasure to be here. I appreciate this opportunity to have a few minutes of your time to speak with you. I particularly want to thank our friends and colleagues on Capitol Hill, congressional representatives and their staff who helped make this wonderful space available. There's a phrase some of you may have heard about the power of ideas and the power of place. And certainly the powerful ideas that will be discussed here by the panel and by the audience today would be true regardless of where the discussion was held in Washington or anywhere. But to be able to hold it in the U.S. Capitol, I think gives it a special meaning to combine both the meaning of the place and the meaning of the ideas. This is a collaboration, of course, between the American Alliance of Museums and the Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs at the State Department. We're very proud at ECA, our abbreviation. We're very proud of the fact that we have programs that go back over half a century. In terms of one of our programs, the International Visitor Leadership Program, it goes back 70 years as we calculate it. But of course, the AAM goes back over 100 years. And so we freely and gladly acknowledge that they are the senior partner in this particular relationship, and we're happy to have it be so. I'm going to talk a little bit about the other partnership, the ECA part. Our name essentially tells you what we do. There's no mystery there. But what I want to talk about is a little bit about our mission of mutual understanding. Those 2 words pretty well sum it all up. You can read the Fulbright-Hays Act in its totality if you ever want to, but mutual understanding really captures it. And what that means is at the Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs, we move people and we move ideas. And of course, we move ideas by moving people, because ideas can wait for us patiently in the pages of books. They can lurk on websites, but ideas, concepts, values, beliefs don't become real in this world until somebody adopts them, until living, breathing human beings decide these ideas, these values make sense, and I'm going to carry them out in this world, and I'm going to behave according to these values and ideas. And that's the kind of strategic convergence, if you will, that generates this kind of program, both from the Alliance and the Department of State. At ECA, for example, every year we conduct programs that engage 50 to 60,000 participants. And if you add in communities, colleagues, associates, families, friends, neighbors, it's scores of thousands of more. We carry out this mandate in approximately 190 countries around the world, and we're very pleased to say that more than 360 of our participants have gone on back home to become the head of state or head of government of their own country. So those of you who are participants, look around you. You may be sitting next to a world leader, or you yourself may be a next world leader. It happens at a rate of about 5 a year for ECA, so we keep turning them out. And also more than 50 have become Nobel Prize laureates, and so we're very proud of our participants. But what I really want to emphasize briefly is what I called a few minutes ago strategic convergence. And that is that the essence of museums, the essence of the Department of State's exchanges these days is community engagement. There was a time when a performer for the Department of State might give a concert to an invited audience, be finished with the concert, go back to their hotel room. An artist might hang an exhibit. Visitors would come through, look at the exhibit, the artist might do a presentation, back to their hotel room. Those days are long, long gone. What we're interested in now is sharing, cooperating, doing things jointly with communities around the world so that the values, the topics, the issues that are addressed, and the kinds and nature of the cultural objects, the art, come from the values and the interests of the community. They are rooted in the values of that community. They engage audiences of all ages and all backgrounds outside any given set of walls, whether those walls are an embassy or those walls are a particular museum. And we take these things to the people, and it's a true partnership. This is something that, of course, is reflected in, I know, in the AAM's strategic plan, where it says specifically, museums strengthen communities. And we agree with that wholeheartedly. And so because these programs are rooted in the communities, because they're based on this firm sense of shared values and common interests, they have lasting impact. The networks that are created, the ideas that are formulated, the accomplishments that come out of them, the new insights that are gained belong to the community, they belong to the participants, and therefore they are lasting and they are enduring, and they make a tremendous contribution to the betterment of our world. And so the State Department is very pleased to be part of the Museums Connect program, to be a partner of the AAM, and to be with you all here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. I would now like to introduce our panelists, who are all past participants in the Museums Connect program. Starting with Dr. Catherine Lewis is Executive Director of Museums, Archives, and Rare Books, Director of the Museum of History and Holocaust Education, and Professor of History at Kennesaw State University in Georgia. She's the author, co-editor, or co-author of 10 books, and is a curator and special projects coordinator for the Atlanta History Center. She oversaw 2 Museums Connect grants with a partner museum in Morocco. Dr. Leah Melber, to her left, is the Senior Director of the Hervis Center for Learning, Innovation, and Collaboration at Lincoln Park Zoo in Chicago. She's been involved in museum and zoo education for over 20 years. Her focus is on creating experiences that help the public learn about life science in authentic and engaging ways, and measuring program impact through quality research and reflection. And Sally Roche Wagner is the founder and director of the Matilda Joslyn Gage Foundation in Fayetteville, New York. A founder of one of the first college-level women's studies programs in the United States at CSU Sacramento, she was awarded one of the country's first doctorates for work in women's studies from UC Santa Cruz. Currently serving as adjunct faculty in the honors program at Syracuse University, she has taught women's studies for 43 years. I'm now going to turn things over to our moderator, Stacy White. Stacy is the Cultural Programs Division Chief in the U.S. Department of State's Bureau of Education and Cultural Affairs. The Bureau, as Rick just mentioned, develops, coordinates, and directs the implementation of cultural exchange programs in the arts and humanities worldwide in support of U.S. foreign policy. During her 25-year diplomatic career, Stacy served in a variety of positions in Washington, D.C., as well as at U.S. embassies in Canada, Finland, Indonesia, Malaysia, Mexico, and Panama. Stacy, take it away.
Well, I have a very poignant memory of this time last year when Senator Inouye came and joined us for this event and shared his thoughts about one of the programs that we were doing. He talked about the importance of building global communities and connecting youth to their stories and to our shared history. And I have to tell you that as a Foreign Service officer and having spent most of my time overseas, I'm very thankful to everybody in this room for your contributions to this great ongoing relationship that we have with the rest of the world, because sharing of ourselves and sharing of our stories, as Rick so eloquently said, is really part of the connections that take place around the globe that allow us all to prosper and frankly build a better future for all of us. Before we start talking a little bit about all our stories here, I just want to share a couple of interesting statistics for you, because Museums Connect, this project that we've had ongoing for a few years, we've reached almost 6,000 participants directly in Museums Connect projects, and more than half of them have been young people and students. We have had 600 travelers, 200 or so young people, 400 community partner groups, including schools, 250,000 community members through exhibits and public programs have been reached, and we've involved 33 countries, 33 American cities, and 21 states, including the District of Columbia. So we're a work in process, and I'm really proud of the fact that everybody has been working here so elegantly to make these stories happen. But first, let's go ahead and listen to Catherine and hear about the stories of her project.
Okay, great. I'm going to stand because I know that not everyone can necessarily see us. And there are 8 seats in the front. I always hate for anyone to feel that it's the professor in me. For everybody who's sitting in the back, it's probably time for you to move forward. So feel free to come forward, make yourself comfortable, especially ladies in your heels. It's going to be an hour, so just don't even hesitate to come forward. We're delighted to be here, and I think I can speak for all the panelists. Always so glad to talk about this project. Museums Connect has been a really exciting part of our museum and our community engagement, and I think there's so many other museums that could tell this story, but we've been invited to give a very brief sort of introduction to 3 different projects. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the project we did in Morocco, and I want to open, thank you all for taking my instructions and sitting in the front. I want to open with an anecdote and then I'll talk a little about the project, how it meets our foreign policy goals, and just a little bit about sustainability. And you don't worry, we're all going to be about 10 minutes, so it's going to go quick. So hold on to your hats. So Khadija, who is one of our students in the Morocco project, her grandmother was terrified about her traveling to the United States from Casablanca, Morocco. She had never been outside of not only her city, but not her neighborhood. So her mother packed her 10 days worth of food. And so she was worried, the grandmother was worried that the food in America would not be safe. So when we picked them up from the airport, the delegation, Khadija, her luggage was giant, as you would imagine, because she's transporting 10 days of food. So as the trip unfolded, I think she came to trust us and to realize that we knew kind of what we were doing, and that American food was just as healthy and interesting in Atlanta and in Washington, D.C. as it was in her neighborhood of Casablanca. And she confessed on about day 5 that she felt a little bit silly, frankly, for being scared. But in a very interesting way, the food became a bridge. It almost became a character on the trip because we had to carry it around with us. So it became a sort of source of late night snacks. We would come together, and you'll see on these Museums Connect projects, you eat a fair amount. So we would come together, the American students, the Moroccan students, in the evening over tea or with a Coca-Cola or whatever they happen to choose. I am from Atlanta, so I have to do a shout out there for Coca-Cola. But it really became a way for them to debrief and to really come to know each other and their stories. And this was in addition to all the formal activities that we did. So when she returned home, and let me just say, left the food with us, so then we had 10 days of food that we had to take care of. Khadija shared her stories and the pictures and the photo album that she had made with her grandmother, who again had been very skeptical, and frankly her entire family had been quite worried. And so in a really interesting way, the project became not only a link between the students, the museums, and the community, but really became part of a family story. Very much a people-to-people diplomacy had sort of expanded to become family-to-family diplomacy. And in this way, we really found the Museums Connect shape the perceptions not just of the participants, but of the people around them. And I think that is a really important byproduct of this project. Just as Stacy explained, the number of people we directly served, that doesn't even attend to the people we're indirectly serving. So we were really helping to shape this dialogue, and it became a family affair, and that's going to be sort of a theme as I work through. We received 2 grants in 2009 and in 2011 between the Museum of History and Holocaust Education and the Bimsik Community Museum in Casablanca, Morocco. The 2009 grant was called Creating Community Collaboration, and it was really focused on an exchange of oral history project, talking about what it means to be a Muslim in sort of modern life in Georgia and in Casablanca. Very different circumstances, but some real commonalities. The second project, Identities, built on that first project with the oral histories and focused on how religion, family, education, and nation shape identity, and what those cross-cultural dialogues can do to expand the way we think about our world. And so as a result of that project, we created an online exhibit. So an oral history project that sort of grew broadly into an online exhibit. So just to tell you a little bit about Bimsik, it is a neighborhood, and I use that term loosely. In Washington, D.C., there are neighborhoods. This is a neighborhood of 1 million people, and it's in one of the poorest neighborhoods of Casa. It has long been identified as a slum, a fairly brutal place to live, a holding place is how a lot of both the residents and the sort of government officials would think about it. But it's very much has the power of place and has a great and rich history. But after 9/11, and of course with the subsequent wars, as we all know, in Iraq and Afghanistan, relations between Muslims and non-Muslims disintegrated, as we start to see, and stereotypes became prevalent in our sort of national dialogue and, frankly, our global dialogue. And we know that because at a grassroots level, we really experienced it. At Kennesaw, which is in Atlanta, about 20 miles north, a suburb of Atlanta, at Kennesaw, we did a survey and asked faculty, staff, students, and community members what they thought about Islam and Muslims. And here's what they said, and I think this is disheartening in some way: oppressive, intolerant, narrow-minded, violent and angry, dangerous. Now, we did a survey in Casa. What do you think about Americans, right? To sort of try to get a broad context. And they would say, a country that takes control of the whole world, endeavors to achieve its ambitions and goals at the expense of other countries. A mammoth sword that chops off the head of the guilty and the innocent alike. So you can see we had some work to do with these 2 communities. So our key activities, not to go into great detail, but our key activities involved a number of workshops with Skype and other sort of technology platforms, talking about Muslim identity, talking about very specific historical circumstances, and then how are we going to sort of do this oral history project in communities where neither participants were experienced oral historians. So we had to train them the skills, we had to work together, and so learning those skills together really bound the students together. There was a lot of international travel back and forth to Atlanta and, of course, here to D.C. And then we had a series of public programs to disseminate our broader findings, what we called coffee and conversation. We did coffee and conversation in the U.S., and of course they did tea. So we really reached about 250 community members in with each public program. So that sort of gives you the context of what we were working with. Now, we were very attentive to the foreign policy goals. This is a State Department grant, so we were really aware that in sort of North Africa and in many of these communities, that the youth face very real problems, not so different from what our youth face in urban environments in the United States. Lack of opportunity, illiteracy and poor education, the concerns that those will be replaced with things like extremism, and the navigation of identity in a global world. And we realized that partnerships, conversation, storytelling were a way to sort of break down this us versus them mentality that both groups seemed to have when we started. And we were honest that we weren't going to change everything. But we certainly changed a great deal in terms of the conversation. And we asked the questions of our youth. What does it mean to be an American or a Moroccan? What does it mean to live in the American South? What does it mean to live in Casablanca? What does your identity mean and how is it shaped? And those were conversations for college-age students that were quite meaningful because they were having them on their own, offline, even without us. So our goals really were youth engagement, strengthening civil society, reaching to marginalized populations, and really promoting educational opportunities because we were both university museums. So I want to close with some successes and a few stories so you can hear the words of our participants. We traveled, as we said, and that really became the arena in which the students engaged with their stereotypes and misperceptions. So one of the Moroccan students says, "What surprised me most was to find out that I simply had the wrong idea about Americans. Wherever we met people, they were kind, polite, warm, and welcoming." Well, we are in the American South, so that should, good that we did that. Another student said, "We Muslims always blame others because they believe in stereotypes and call us terrorists. But frankly, we make the same mistakes when we judge Americans just relying on the media." So that was, I think, a useful way to think about it. One of the American students said, "I saw Islam as sort of a giant concept, not as a person or a friend." And that, I think, became important. We had a moment, I want to share just a moment before I talk about how this shaped the museums, but we had a moment where the students had just visited in Casa, and you'll see these great photographs of the hennaed hands, and I want to show you the picture of them outside Supreme Court just across the street. But we had a moment where there had been a drum circle outside of the Hassan II Mosque, which is, of course, one of the largest mosques in Morocco and one in the Islamic world. And there was a drum circle. The students were coming out of the tour, both the Moroccan and the American students. And the American students simply had never seen anything like that. So they sort of stepped up to it, watched it, had their cameras, and all of a sudden the Moroccan musicians pulled the students in, both the Moroccan students and the American students. And so we have this wonderful video of all of the students participating in a drum circle, and it became a powerful metaphor for our project. So as I come to the end, we also wanted to talk a little bit about what it meant for museums and the power of friendship. A Moroccan student said, "I've never been to a museum. I never thought of them because of our culture. I just believed that they were for adults and maybe the rich. I still remember one day when I was in Rabat. I passed in front of a museum, but I could not go inside. I was afraid the price would be too high, and I was embarrassed because I didn't have enough money." And another sort of example of friendship, one student said, "On Friday, we paid a visit to Emily's house. She was very sweet. They prepared a table of cakes and candies, and I appreciated it, and it will stick in my mind forever, a conversation I had with her mother. She hugged me and said, 'You know, Emily really loves you.' I wanted to say I love her too, but I didn't. The first time these feelings, I didn't sort of recognize our borders or differences. Aaron and Allison and Allie, all American students, were kind, and if I lived in the US, they would have been my best friends. I have something in common with them. We are from different cultures. Yes, we are different, but we can love each other. After all, we are all Allah's children. Before this trip, I considered everything to be black and white. If we didn't think alike, we didn't worship the same God, we didn't share the same values, we will not understand each other.' That was silly. Special thanks to Museum Connect for opening my eyes." I love that last plug for Museum Connect. So, the final example of friendship, our partner Samir Elazar, who you see sort of in the middle, was a wonderful partner. He really became a rock star for us. And about the third year into the program, Samir and I were crossing the street on 17th out here in DC. And Samir turned to me and put his hand on my shoulder and said, "I just have to tell you that we started as colleagues. We became friends. and now you're my sister. And that is not something that Moroccans say lightly. So I take that quite seriously. So to close, just a word about sustainability. The project for us is over, but it has made a big difference, and we have left an important imprint. We have been recognized by the Moroccan Ministry of Education, both the project and the BIMC Community Museum. We believe it to be the first community museum in Morocco and one of the first in North Africa. It was the impetus to develop the Moroccan Museums Association. There was no such thing before this project, and that has resulted in that development. We also published, Samir and two of our colleagues did a book for AAM called Museums in a Global Context that Leah has a chapter in that came out in 2013. We've gotten follow-up grants from the American Library Association. We've done a number of conference presentations. We've developed new courses on Moroccan and American culture at our universities. There's a new Moroccan-American Studies program, and those relationships between students and faculty have endured. I've written letters of recommendation to graduate school for students in Morocco, and our colleagues have done the same for our students. We've done education abroad and a number of collaborative programs. So I'm simply one member of a very large team that worked really hard to really focus on a challenge that we saw of overcoming stereotypes, used Museums Connect in the State Department at AAM and engaged them, of course, as our partners. And this has been a project that has endured and we hope changed some lives. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. It was really a great program, and we enjoyed meeting them when they came
They were
through
great.
last year. They were fantastic. Leah, we'd like to hear about yours.
So my name is Leah Melber. Actually, I forgot I might need this. I don't usually stand behind a podium. I'm too short. My name is Leah Melber, and I'm from the Lincoln Park Zoo. And our partnership was with the National Museum of Niger in Niamey, Niger. So for anyone who may not know exactly where Niger is, because I will tell you that some of the students that we worked with in the United States were not aware of exactly where Niger is. It is located in Western Africa, as you can see, and it has some pretty significant partners as well and borders of folks that we've seen in the news. And we wanted to look at the idea of conservation. We were very excited to work with the National Museum of Niger because their location in Africa has a lot to do with our work. As a zoo, we're really focused on species conservation, conservation of the environment, and combating illegal trafficking and all these things that threaten our world. And unfortunately, when we're looking at species that are in peril, oftentimes they are located in areas where there's poverty, there are other challenges, as well as sometimes political strife. So we're very excited to work with a country in Africa and really look at increasing appreciation for local wildlife and hopefully want to do some work to better conserve that. So our project really focused on working with youth in the United States, as well as in Africa, on conducting original research, conducting observations of animal behavior, much like you see Jane Goodall do when she's in Gombe watching her chimps and recording what they're doing. We wanted to have youth in the U.S. and in Niger conduct similar research so that they could better understand the wildlife that they're observing, hopefully develop more of an appreciation for this wildlife, and in turn also develop some scientific skills that would be applicable to studies later on in the sciences. And of course, this does tie to the Department of State goals and foreign policy goals. And we saw the two strongest connections in the area of working with youth and improving educational opportunity. This project did partner with two schools in Niger. They were high schools that really had high achieving youth. These are youth that are likely to go on to university, most likely abroad, but many of them do return back to their country to really help build infrastructure and support development within their home country. So we knew these youth would definitely make a difference in their future. We really wanted conservation to be one of those things they felt strongly about. And then, of course, we also were looking at the process and the importance of educating the public when it comes to conservation issues with wildlife. So the project was called Community of Conservation, and we had several key activities that were a part of the project. The most important one was actually getting the youth to collect the data, to get out there and observe animals and spend time watching them carefully, recording what they're doing. If it's a cat, every 15 seconds when you're recording what it's doing, I don't know what your cat does, but mine is resting. Resting. Resting, resting. But we helped the youth understand that that is data too, and that does help you understand. They didn't like that. They'd get very bored with that. So, where's the dog? Running, playing, running, digging, running, digging. And then we also created a bilingual curriculum guide, a printed curriculum guide, so that they could share it with youth that were not necessarily part of the project. We, as the other project, had cultural exchange, which was through Skype, through email, through correspondence, as well as through participating with each other's teams when we went to visit each country. And then lastly, we did have a community event in each country, which was an opportunity for the participating youth to share what they were doing with the broader community. And we have some really great stories with that as well. I have to point out Mr. Boubacar. Mr. Boubacar was our liaison between the two projects, and Mr. Boubacar very much enjoyed having his picture taken. So we have very few photos that do not involve Mr. Boubacar. I had to work very hard to find ones with just the youth. So I do work at a zoo, and not surprisingly, zoos here in the U.S. are very different than zoos in developing nations. So the National Museum of Niger was a very different zoo with very different infrastructure, and it was really important for our entire team and our youth to understand that there are different resources in this country. And we were very lucky that this zoo cared very deeply for their animals, and they did whatever they could to support their welfare. But unfortunately, Niger is one of the poorest countries in Africa. It ranks lowest in the UN on all sorts of issues, from life expectancy to education levels to health and welfare. So we're really looking at a country with very, very limited resources. One very exciting outcome from this project, you can see this chimpanzee here has a very different enclosure than we'd see at the National Zoo or at our zoo, Lincoln Park Zoo. The youth conducted an original research study on the chimpanzee's behavior when people were near it and teasing it, and when they were not. And they actually came to the conclusion on their own that the animal was much more agitated and unhappy when people were teasing it or bothering it. So they let us know that they think that that's not a good idea, that it's best to leave the animal and just watch it carefully. So these are accomplishments that are coming from within the youth, from within the community, which is so much more powerful than us showing up and telling them what needs to happen to promote animal welfare and conservation. It was not the only outcome. One of the things that we were really excited to see was a general appreciation on the part of the Nigerian youth for their national wildlife, as well as for wildlife and animals in general. We are looking at a country where the role of animals within the community is very different than here in the US. I will tell you, the Nigerian visitors think everyone in Chicago is absolutely crazy for putting raincoats and booties on their dogs when they walk them on the ice. You should have seen their face when they saw this. But we did, one of the youth came up to me and she said, you know, before we started this project, we thought animals, we didn't like them. We didn't want them around us. We would throw rocks at them. And I'm trying to keep a very impassive face. Tell me more. And what she said was, when we spent time watching them, we realized that they were sentient beings and they matter. She didn't use the word sentient. She had trouble with the translation, but she said they're beings, you know, beings. And they walk and they play and they're just like us. So the idea that that's one of the first steps that we want, empathy, that takes us to change behavior and conservation behavior. We also saw that the youth, when they would observe animals, apparently their parents all thought they were crazy. They didn't know what they were doing, just watching the dog or the parrot resting. But when we gave them the published curriculum guide to take back with them, and their family saw photos of them in this published full-color curriculum guide, they realized that this was indeed an important project, and it was science, and it was something worthwhile. So we found that this element of the program was so very important, this formal bilingual curriculum guide that showed this is something important to study. And we were not the only ones, the Nigerians were not the only ones to benefit from this project. The U.S. youth saw some really incredible growth as well. The timing of the project was interesting. It happened just after there was some activity with Gaddafi loyalists in Niger, and as you know, just before some activity in Mali. So one of the things we're really excited about is we're looking at an entire school, a part of the Chicago community and our entire zoo family that knows Niger not from what's in the headlines, not from a travel warning, which is important, of course, but also from a one-on-one connection with the individuals from within this country. And I think that's something that this project did. It really promotes this global understanding and this idea of cultural universals. You can see it was March when the Nigerians came to visit us, which, let me tell you, almost sent them home. And it was very cold in Chicago. We had to bring in clothing from home, scarves and hats and gloves for them because they didn't have sufficient clothing. And Mr. Ali, who's the director of the museum, nabbed that orange scarf because, as you can see, that is the orange, which is part of the colors of the Nigerian flag, and he wore that every day. He was very excited about that orange scarf. I think he might have pushed somebody out of the way to grab the orange scarf. Even though he was in charge, they would have had to give it to him anyway. Our partnership with Parker School, which was a school we worked with in Chicago, this is a school with very academically enriched children. These are youth that are going to go on to make a difference. And one of the reasons the school was very excited to participate with us is they know the importance of understanding cultural universals. When we're looking at careers, these youth are going to go into careers in science, in politics, in economics, in business, and this is not possible without global understanding, without understanding cultural differences, without being able to effectively communicate and work with other countries. So we feel one of the most lasting tenets of this partnership is really providing the opportunity for this youth to gain insight into an area of the world all they knew about was it was hot, they speak French there, and it's somewhere in Africa. That was the pre-visit. And the post-visit had a lot of information about the country that was much richer and much deeper. Sustainability, the youth are continuing to have this global understanding, which is obviously a super critical part of their growth as they move forward in their schooling. In Niger, we were able to develop a laboratory of computers both at the museum as well as at the site of one of the schools. One of the schools was very, very far from the museum, and this provided them with the opportunity to continue to engage with the world beyond their community. Do you know, many of them had never been to a natural area outside their community, their city. We allowed them their first glimpse of an elephant, their first glimpse of a giraffe. The wildlife we're asking them to protect as a country, they had never seen before. And this project allowed them that opportunity. For us, one of the most sustainable pieces is we used our research data from this project to create an app that's available, iPad, iPhone, people, download right now, Observe to Learn, it's free. And it's a technology